Madam, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Very good morning to you all. On behalf of the organizing committee of the International Open University Research Session 2022, I warmly welcome all of you to the panel discussion on digital citizenship and the changing nature of the graduate attributes. This panel discussion is organized by the Faculty of Education in collaboration with the research unit of the Open University of Sri Lanka. So let me introduce the moderator of this panel, Professor Shironika Karnanayaka, Senior Professor in Education Technology. Attached to the Faculty of Education is the moderator of this today's discussion. So I am handing over the session to you, Madam, to introduce the panelists and to start the session.
Okay, thank you very much, Vajira. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our session organized by the Faculty of Education, as Vajira mentioned, Digital Citizenship and the Changing Nature of Graduate Attributes, which is quite important in the current days. So I would like to welcome our panelists, 4 panelists, and I will give a brief introduction on each of them. Before that, I would like to remind that this session is being recorded, and we are going to have a Q&A session at the end of the session. And if you have, you're welcome to, while the session is going on, you're welcome to put your any questions or comments in the chat box, and the panelists can address them at the end of the session. Okay, so let me introduce each of our panelists, though many of them do not really need a special introduction anyway. The 4 panelists are Professor Somna Idu, Dr. Sanjay Mishra, Ms. Sukaina Walji, and Ms. Renata Sgario. Professor Somna Idu is the Principal Associate of Technology, Education and Design Associates Australia, and former Pro Vice Chancellor and Director of the Center for Flexible Learning, the University of the South Pacific. He has previously served at the Swinburne University of Technology, Charles Sturt University, and the University of Melbourne, Australia. He's a Principal Fellow of the Higher Education Academy. A former President of the Open and Distance Learning Association of Australia, ODLA, Som has served as the executive editor of its journal, Distance Education, since 1997. He possesses doctoral degree in education technology from Concordia University and undergraduate qualifications in education from the University of Waikato. Som has extensive experience in the enhancement of learning and teaching at all levels of education and across all sectors. In 2014, the Open University of Sri Lanka awarded Som Doctor of Letters honoris causa in recognition of his extensive contribution to the field of open, flexible, distance, and e-learning. We have worked very closely with Som since 2003, and he has immensely supported and facilitated us in many initiatives implemented at the Open University of Sri Lanka. Welcome, Som. Dr. Sanjay Mishra. He's the Director Education at the Commonwealth of Learning in Canada, and he's one of the leading scholars in open, distance, and online learning with extensive experience in teaching, staff development, research, and policy development. And with a multidisciplinary background in education, information science, communication media, and learning and development, Sanjay has been promoting the use of educational multimedia, e-learning, open educational resources, and open access to scientific information. He has written and edited many publications and serves on the editorial boards of several journals in the field of distance and online learning. He has designed and developed award-winning online courses and platforms such as Understanding Open Educational Resources, Hall Commons, and Commonwealth Digital Education Leadership Training in Action, C-Delta. We have close associations with Sanjay too since 2003. With many projects we have implemented with the support from Commonwealth of Learning Call and SEMCA as well. And even currently we have implemented several initiatives, including the C-Delta project, even we are implementing currently. We welcome you also, Sanjay. Okay, then Ms. Sukaina Walji. Okay, Sukaina is the Director of Center for Innovation in Learning and Teaching, CILT, at the University of Cape Town, South Africa. She oversees operational functions, including design and develop blended and online courses, and provides strategic advice for digitally enabled education. In her previous role as the coordinator of CILT's curriculum and course design team, she managed the digital media unit and the learning design team. She has been the MOOCs project manager there and has worked on various digital education projects. Sukaina's research interests include learning design, MOOCs, unbundled higher education, and assessment practices. She has a master's in online and distance education from the Open Institute UK and BA Honours from Oxford University. And I have worked with Sukaina on various projects in OER and digital education, and happy to welcome you, Sukaina. Then our next panelist is Ms. Renata Asgario. Renata is the founder and Chief Executive Officer at MaxMe at Melbourne, Australia. She is also Chair and Non-Executive Director at Future First Technologies. Renata is an experienced senior executive with about 3 decades specializing in customer-centered, technology-led business transformation at leading companies both in Australia and abroad. Renata's passion for developing human potential has led her to founding MaxMe, a human skills development company which offers a unique digital solution to help students and recent graduates sustainably build the human skills required in a rapidly changing world, based on techniques used to coach and develop graduates over many years to enter the workforce at the commencement of their career journey. Welcome, Renata. As you can see, we have a very well-experienced panelists from different countries, international experts. So we are going to have we hope to have a very productive discussion on our topic, which is mainly focusing on digital citizenship and developing graduate attributes, which are both very significant and being talked about in many instances. So let us commence, let us proceed with this panel discussion, starting with what is digital citizenship and what are graduate attributes. So, and why, what's the importance, what the significance, and what's the link between these two concepts? So can I ask Som to start on the discussion, explaining what is digital citizenship and what are graduate attributes, what are their significances and how they relate to each other. Over to you, Som.
Thank you, Shironika. Thank you very much for the invitation. It's greetings, everyone, I should have said, and my friends and colleagues in Sri Lanka. It's a pleasure to be on this panel and be alongside my friends, Renata, Sanjaya, and Sukaina, who you know very well. Listen, I'm going to make some very quick comments, and then I'm sure other people would like to add to it. I've just been giving that question a bit of thought this morning. I mean, the obvious no-brainer in relation to that is that the digital world is expanding. We all know that, as I travel around the world and as you travel around the world, I'm sure you're noticing that digital technologies are becoming more accessible in every part of the world, developing world and the developed world. And but the truth of the matter is that most of us are going to go through this space or this transition pretty much harmlessly and innocuously, without too much trouble. Technology is becoming user-friendly and very easy to use. But the digital world, the reason why I think we need to be thinking seriously about this is that things are more complicated than it may seem to the average user. Renata will be aware of it, that in Australia at the moment I've been away 2 months from the country, but just I come back and I hear this massive breach of data from one of the major health providers, Medibank Private, which is 9 million records. I mean, don't forget that the population of Australia is about 28 million. So half the population of Australia is a subscriber to Medibank Private, which is a private health provider. And some hackers have been able to access the database and are now threatening, or have threatened, and have actually released some of their data in the dark web. So one starts wondering, what is the dark web? And then you'll find out that the internet is not what it seems like. The internet, from a layperson's viewpoint, comprises of so many layers that most of us is just surfacing and just playing around above the water, so to speak, and splashing around with the obvious browsers like Google and the others, so Safari and so on and so on. But you go further down and you'll find that there are other kinds of software that let you into what is called the deep web, and then there is more. There's called the dark web, and you need specific software to get to that, and it's accessible to everyone. That's the scary part of it, that it's not just that it is dark and it is way down deep and that very few people will have access to it, but it's actually accessible to anyone from their desktop. So the truth of the matter is that there is a lot more to the digital world than it may seem to the common user who is looking at the iPhone or the phone, coming and going to work, sending emails and sending messages. So what is the point of what I'm saying? The point of what I'm saying is that there's a need for us to seriously consider how we can acculturate, and perhaps that's the best word that I come off at the moment, or educate people, not just on the internet, but the technologies around the internet and the technologies that are off the internet as well. And this is why I think it is imperative that organizations start looking at their graduate attributes. If you look around, most universities will have some sort of graduate attributes. Everybody's expected to graduate with some sort of skills, and Renata will talk about these generic skills that she's very much a champion of. But my fear is that a lot of the digital skills that we require in the contemporary world in the near future are not accurately and appropriately represented in those graduate attributes. And this is why I think organizations need to think about it seriously and make sure that these are articulated specifically so that they can be addressed in the programs that they offer. But let me go a step further, and I was looking at some of the stuff. Even if you were to do that, even if the organizations that are doing that, you'll find that most of the times, organizations are thinking about digital literacy, which is, understanding the technology. Can I use email or social media and those sorts of things? And the second thing that comes off of the tongue is digital etiquette, behavior, respect, of course, bullying, those sorts of things comes into the equation there. Then in association with digital etiquette is digital rights and responsibilities, the freedoms. And while the internet, and other kinds of technologies give us a lot of freedom. Freedoms come with responsibility, and that is not different from the responsibilities and freedom that we enjoy in real life, isn't it? In democratic countries like the ones that we live in the Western world, it comes with a responsibility. You can't just go around calling names at people in real life. And if you do that, you'll be either punched in the face or somebody's going to sue you. It's the same on the internet, that you have this responsibility. That doesn't mean that you can go around posting anything you want. So digital rights and responsibility, digital etiquette, those are the sorts of things that we're talking about. And more importantly now, of course, as I was saying, digital security and privacy. So these are the obvious things. And I think organizations, educational organizations in particular, need to make sure that they have a serious relook at their graduate attributes and see if these are adequately represented. There are a few more there. I'll just say a few more things and I'll let others have a go. I mean, the other things that I figured out is about the laws relating to the digital world, understanding and complying. I mean, for example, the sorts of things I was talking about, the dark web, do we know what the laws are? Can you download a browser? How many of us know that you can download on your PC a browser that will allow you to actually dig into the dark web? Do we know about that? I mean, I was actually exploring that a little bit and decided not to do it because I'm not sure about the laws in Australia, and I don't want to be caught off guard about that. So one needs to understand the laws relating to the digital world and our use of digital technologies. Digital access is the other thing. Like I said, even though the digital world is increasing, there are still many people who will not have access to a lot of these technologies that we're talking about. And engaging in commerce, so many of us are now buying things online and doing business online, banking online, all sorts of insurance things or payment online. Now, there are laws and regulations and rules related to that and how to go about doing it, because in some cases, people are requiring, for example, that banks are making sure that, that nobody comes into the bank, that everything is conducted at the ATM or through the card or through the web. Some of the banks are saying, we actually don't want you to come inside the bank, so it's a cashless environment. And of course, the other thing is about digital communication and digital health and welfare, making sure that, issues around mental health and psychological stress on people spend too much time. So there's a whole bunch of issues around the digital world, isn't it? And I'm just rattling off some of the things that we need to consider. The main point that I'm saying is that, the digital world, while it is here and it is going to grow, obviously, is a lot more complicated than it may seem to the average user. But the truth of the matter is that the average user is unaware of all of these complications and the rules and regulations and laws around it. So the final point is that educational organizations need to make sure that as quickly as possible, these things are very carefully considered and thought about and integrated in the graduate attribute, because if it's not there, then programs cannot address it. So once you have it, if you say, for example, critical thinking or digital literacy are one of those attributes, then you can hold the people who are developing the programs accountable to make sure that they're addressing these kinds of things. Otherwise, you are going to miss the mark. Your programs are going to miss the mark. And that's the point that we're making. But listen, I am going to stop there and let somebody else have a go.
Thank you, Som. I think that's a good opening for our discussion. So I think you highlighted the fact that digital citizenship is not only digital literacy, but it's mostly about this online behavior, safety, and security, as well as values. So we have a responsibility as educationists and educational institutions to develop the graduate attributes of our graduates or our students to have that digital citizenship which is understood as a norms of behavior regarding the use of digital. We are there. Okay, so I think it takes us to the next point, which I would like Sukaina to address. What is the significance of digital citizenship in higher education, what is the significance of digital citizenship in higher education and even education more generally. I think you have a lot of experience, Sukaina, working in this context. So let us, please share your thoughts with us. Over to you, Sukaina.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sharonika, for the invitation. And it's really a pleasure to be here with my colleagues who I have worked with and interacted and managed to meet before COVID, and I hope to do so again in the coming future. So this is it's been a really interesting thought process thinking about digital citizenship and in relation to higher education. I mean, it seems, in many ways, very an obvious link in the sense that higher education is a journey. Higher education is a transition. It's a huge kind of if I think about the students and their journey when they enter, or even when they're thinking about higher education, when they enter higher education, and the choices that they make, and the potential for higher education to transform their lives completely in terms of epistemic access to the ability to knowledge and to create knowledge, but also for economic freedom. And I think particularly in global South contexts and in the context of South Africa, where our participation rate in higher education is less than 20%. And so I think in contexts such as ours in South Africa, the role that higher education institutions play in fostering, the whole gamut of graduate attributes, but particularly around the notion of citizenship and digital citizenship is really crucial. I think I'm just going to pick up on something that Som was saying around the people being not being informed, but it's all going around the whole sort of digitization of society. We're doing everything digitally, and I think the point I would make first is it's not really an option not to be a digital citizen anymore. It's not something that we can opt out of. We are in a post-digital era in the sense that digital technologies, tools are ubiquitous. They shape what is happening unconsciously or subconsciously, or even without us being aware. And here I'm, referring to how the digital mediates the physical world. And I think that's really what's became very apparent in COVID and post-COVID. But I think the notion of the post-digital and that it's not really an option, and therefore it's an imperative for higher education institutions to grapple with this concept beyond the notion of digital skills and digital literacies. And I think this is where we come to issues around ethics, agency, who gets to decide and choose to participate, choice. What are, in a higher education institution, what are the tools, technologies, practices that we are going to encourage and foster? And so I think the notion of design comes in here when we think about curriculum, and we'll maybe talk about that a bit later. And when we talk about the kinds of tools and technologies that we use. And if I think about what happened during COVID, when we are a residential university, and so when COVID hit, we, along with other institutions in South Africa and globally, had the online, pivoted online, but we had to send our students home. We had to empty the residences, and we moved very quickly online. And we really appreciated the importance of the investments that had been made in digital technologies, but we also saw the gaps and the digital competences, capabilities, and literacies that both staff and students had to very quickly learn. And many students struggled, and there are still learning losses. I think that has been a real wake-up call for institutions, that there's really no going back. So even though we will be going back to, what we call, sort of our full residential experience next year and face-to-face teaching, there's really no going back. Our practices have been changed. We are working in hybrid modes. Our students have appreciated different forms of blended learning and so on. So in that sense, the technology and the tools and the practices that are shaping and that we are shaping are in our environment. So there's not really an option anymore for us not to engage. But at the same time, the digital divide continues, and we found this out really when in our first, when we did not have our students in residences and campus, and the inequalities intensified. And I think this is another point here where the notion of digital citizenship is no longer separated from, I think, like the physical, and that digital citizenship and the notion of citizenship in terms of what are the rights and responsibilities of a citizen have parallels in the kind of digital era. So without informed choices, we have the risk of digital inequalities that then continue to negatively impact more marginalized groups, and those from particular socioeconomic backgrounds, people with caring responsibilities, female students, and so on. And so that's something I think in terms of digital literacies, digital capabilities that are subsets, I suppose, of digital citizenship. And if we think about the student journey, and I started with this, entry into higher education requires particular types of digital skills and knowledge, even applications, understanding, making choices, and then participation in higher education. So the use of technology in education is now ubiquitous, or becoming ubiquitous. But it's also, it's not just, yes, I can use the learning management system, or I can do this, or I can use social media. It's actually in the disciplines now. The digital shapes the discipline, and so it's epistemic the link between epistemic access to knowledge and to your discipline, and the ability to use, deploy, and have choices about digital technologies as well. The other thing that I've been thinking about is, and we find this with our students when they come in, is the need to unlearn as well. So students come in with experiences of using social media, of TikTok, of WhatsApp, and the things that they live in a virtual digital world. But when they come in, some of those practices do not align with what we would consider practices that in higher education, so critical thinking. And sometimes it's the choice not to practice a particular sort of, not to use a particular digital tool in a particular context. So things like privacy, ethics come in. So there's actually unlearning. So we think, oh, our students are very digitally literate when they come into higher education, but actually the link between digital literacies and academic literacies needs to be fostered in the curriculum, but also as part of the university experience. There's the kind of conversations and educational aspects here, and then success and graduation in higher education. So students need to use many tools and technologies according to the disciplinary context, because there are very few fields now that do not have their own practices that are being developed. But I think also higher education is more than about the teaching of the discipline, creating knowledge or a new job. I think it's also about the creation of an individual developing as a responsible citizen and a member of society in order to live a good life. And I think that if we think about it in that way, it's also about agency, students' agency, staff agency, and the right to contest the use of digital technologies in your own context as well. And that requires, I think, as Som was saying, a real understanding of governance, of laws. What is it that one should do? What is it that one can do? What are the risks? And so on. So I think I'm going to stop there, but I'm just going to finish with one that I think also I would like to push back a little bit on the notion of digital citizenship, because it also can be exclusive, just as citizenship as a notion excludes people, refugees and people who cannot belong for whatever reason. I think there's also the potential for the notion of digital citizenship to be exclusive. And I think here, if digital citizenship is about belonging to an institution or a community, we need to think about those who are excluded. And I'm thinking in the digital space, without real effort in terms of design, people with, for example, disabilities couldn't be very easily excluded without attention. And so I think it's not only the individual who can exercise digital citizenship. I think the structures and institutions also need to change or have investments or the skills in order to make sure that the notion of digital citizenship does not exclude. And I will stop there. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Sukaina. I think you raised a few important points there, especially about the significance of our higher education institutions, especially about catering to the current digital needs and how to respond to them in a responsible manner, how to aware our students and making them learning to unlearn and relearn. So you talked about a few ideas, and I think it moves on. I mean, we can move on to the. Now you mentioned that the importance is that they are going to the society because they are going to function as responsible individuals in the society, the students, once they graduate. So I think it brings us to the next question. Okay, what is, because in the society they are going to be employees somewhere, and they are going to be workers. So especially the current knowledge society, there's a great responsibility that we have to equip these students with the necessary skills, not only the skills, but the attitudes, the knowledge, skills, and attitudes, all competencies for them to function as responsible citizens in the knowledge society. So I think Renata has a lot of experience in this area. So can I ask Renata, okay, what is the role of digital citizenship in the development of graduate attributes and employability? Because that's our main target, the employability. So I think you have worked a lot along that area. So we would like to have your thoughts based on your experiences, Renata.
Thanks, Sharonika, and thank you very much for having me on board. I feel I feel overwhelmed by the profiles that led before mine, and the fact that mine is a bit different. And that is, I spent a little bit of time in the world of education and a lot of time in the world of work. I spent 30 years before I started MaxMe working in organisations such as Accenture, Telstra, which is a large telecommunications company in Australia, EDS, a global, IT provider, NAB, a very large, bank within Australia, and Latitude Financial Services, which was a GE money business. So again, a global company. And so for me, the lens that I bring to this conversation is one of employability. And thank you. You use those words. It's so important. And I sometimes get a bit caught out in what I think is sometimes a bit of a pendulum swings a bit too far. And I believe, I've now got a 20-year-old child who's second year uni, and I've got a 17-year-old daughter who's about to finish school. And when I think about their passage through further education, for me, the number one thing that they're trying to do is to make themselves more employable, to help themselves to get a job, to help themselves to land in a career path, and the things that come with having work, and that is meaning, adding value back into society, and also importantly, financial freedom. And so when I think about I guess, the digital world. And that's where I come from. I'm a technologist. I have done a lot of work in the world of technology. And so digitization for me, it's kind of been the way I've always done things in my career. I started as a coder. I've been a tester, a designer. I've, led large teams of technology people, data analysts and coders, et cetera, et cetera. And when I think about that world of enablement, technology does enable many, many things. And I think about, I'm 50 now. So, when I was in my 20s, technology looked very different to the way that it looks today. And I think about the deep enablement that technology has brought about with it. I had the original Motorola phone. I tried to describe to my daughters what it was like to carry that brick around. It literally was a brick, and I carried it on my side pocket, with such passion. And I was so proud of having this, latest technology, the smartphone. Like it's like a computer used to fill a room, the same power that we have in our hands right now with a smartphone. So technology is a huge enabler. And as we've said, Som and Sakina, there's a lot of responsibility with that. Technology can be for good and also for evil, as we've seen. Som points out so rightly that hackers get to data and they start to publish intimate, personal data about people into the public eye, and we have no control over that. It can be used for evil. But digitization and technology is a great enabler, and we're going to start seeing it go rapid. It's starting to pace up. And, people are describing what's happened in the last 2 years of the pandemic. It would have taken 10 normal years to get to the point of technology advancement that we have been forced into in the last 2 years. So what we've seen is the great enabler when we remove all of the barriers and the reasons why we can't, and we just make things happen, actually technology advances really fast. So the people on this call, the graduates of further education, they're going to see roles in 10 years' time that don't exist today, because technology is starting to automate the jobs that are in place right now. Those jobs that can be automated will be automated. But the work that's left for humans, because there will always be work for humans, this hype around, the technology is going to take all of our jobs, it's rubbish. The work that's going to be left for humans, though, is going to start to get ever more complex, because the complex work is difficult to automate. It's difficult to digitize. And so the robots will have to work with the humans together. And actually, we're going to have to try and advance society, products, services together with the automation, together with the digitization. But the skills required as humans to do the work that we're going to need to do actually are different in nature, and they're skills that are not taught today. And I call them human skills, soft skills, social emotional skills. McKinsey, a very large global think tank, published a paper last year. And in that paper, they described the skills that citizens are going to need to thrive in the digital world. 70% of those skills are social emotional skills or human skills. They're actually not technical skills in nature. So it's quite ironic that in a digital world, the humans are going to need soft skills actually to thrive and be able to really have that employability, that career progression, and that thriving, knowing how to, work with other humans in that complexity, knowing how to, enable that technology, work alongside of it, deeply, process and critically problem solve and innovate in that complexity. Those skills, they're probably not taught in earnest within the education pathways that we have today, for good reason, because those education pathways themselves are emerging. And so really, very importantly, we're going to have to lean into this education and employability skill nexus and make sure that we continue to expose our learners to the very skills that they're going to need to be able to thrive in that world, in that digitized world.
Thank you, Renata. I think your experience in this area is quite valuable because I think you have worked in these areas quite extensively and essentially developing these human skills, as you mentioned. Well, not only focusing on the digital skills, because everybody is more interested in developing their digital skills, but sometimes forget about these human skills, which is very important, or the soft skills, social emotional skills that are linked with the responsible use of digital skills. I think that point is really, really important for them to function in this society, in their, as as employable, I mean, the knowledge society, especially to function as responsible individuals in the society. Okay, thank you. I think we can talk about those things more in the coming time. And then I think it's also, now we are talking about graduate attributes, right? Our main focus is on graduate attributes. So we are talking about our learners in the higher education institutions. So they are learning. So we also have to think about their learning achievement as well, development of graduate attributes, learning their achievements in the learning, as well as employability. So it links with the learning outcomes as well. So I think Sanjay, at the Commonwealth of Learning, you all have been supporting a lot of educational institutions along these areas. So I think this is a good opportunity for you to share, based on your experiences, how can we support the development of digital citizenship in order to enhance students' learning achievement, graduate attributes, and employability. Over to you, Sanjay.
Thank you, Professor Sironika. Thank you very much for the invitation to join this distinguished panel. And the topic now is so interesting, and I must congratulate the Open University of Sri Lanka team to have identified this topic for discussion. Has led me to think a lot about what is graduate attribute, what is global graduate attributes. Every university has their own graduate attributes. What are real global graduate attributes? That's one kind of things to think about. My predecessors, the panelists, have made my speaking a little easier for me, and I will draw from their insights things that talked about, and then go into what are the possible way forward and what we have been doing a little bit in this area. Most important part, and I think Sukena talked about something called exclusion, and the whole concept of citizenship is something that is important for me to think about from my past experiences in other organizations as well. What the concept of citizenship excludes certain kind of people, and therefore in the taking that metaphor into the digital world, I think the most foremost important thing for us as universities and higher education institutions to look at that digital would inherently exclude certain groups of people, and therefore as educational institutions, what are the things that we must do that our students are not excluded from that discourse in the digital world. So we have seen in the last 2 years what kind of exclusion has happened in most developed countries to the poor countries. Everywhere it was the same thing. No one was left behind in that race of exclusion. So it is very important to think about that digital citizenship should have an inclusive approach for everyone. And how can we do that as institution? Policymakers need to think about that as something fundamental, and there is no going about it. Because technology will be there, new technologies will be developing, and keeping pace with the technology will always be challenging, and we need to do that. But we need to focus on equity and equitable opportunities for our students. That's the institutional role, what the institutions will do. That's number one. Number two is that what is that we want them to have graduate attributes. Okay. In the context, not just in the traditional context, we want our students to be employable graduates, but at the same time, have the necessary skills required for them to be successful in their life. The studies and so many reports tell us that the jobs of the future, the skills needed in the future, the jobs of the futures are yet to be invented. So how do we create the curriculum? How do you prepare our students so that they are successful, they live their life well beyond? So that's looking at the sustainable development aspect of our life. How do you create, how do you foster digital attributes, digital skills among students so that their economic growth, social inclusion, environmental concern, everything are taken care of? That is the second most important aspect. And within that framework, what is important for us to look at, what are the things that digital technology can do well, beyond giving us skills that I can make use for my job or my own personal life. We need to think about education as a global good. And in that aspect, what is more important to look at, how can digital skills and digital global graduate attributes foster peace and understanding around the world? How can it foster cultural heritage, intercultural faith, and intercultural tolerance? How can it foster collaboration and cooperation amongst people, not create competitions and create dollar values only? So the important things of, if we as a humanity have to do well, we cannot live in a society which certain groups of people have everything and there are another group of people do not have anything. So how can the society be balanced for sustainable development? And can digital skills help in that direction? And universities need to think about those things that can be included in the curricular framework. Having said that, the curricular framework, when it comes to curricular framework, there are two groups of people in the society. And particularly the group of people in the university sectors are two groups, and open universities more so, there are two groups. What are those? One is the digital born, and the other one is digital immigrants, using the terminology of citizenship. Many of us are digital immigrants, and we are trying to understand and we are trying to apply those things. But today's children, they are born digital, and they are starting to use the smartphones or from the age 1 or below the age 1 as well. But assuming that they will know everything from what Som talked about, dark web and the challenges of using technology, it will be something naive for every one of us. Even those who have been heavily using technologies, most of us might have felt one or twice cheated on the technological world by clicking on phishing emails. It's obvious that, for the best of the tech people also to fall into this trap. So what is important in the digital attributes or digital citizenship attributes is to prepare people to understand these challenges and safeguard themselves and others around them. Because as this technology grows more and more, this technology, which was initially started as a distributed technology has resulted into a centralized form of technology, and more and more it was started as a space which was open, but technology has made it more and more or the more and more opaqueness has come into the whole process. So it's no more transparent, and there are huge amount of things that happens which is not known to common people. When they're clicking on their mobile phone, they don't know that within 10 seconds there will be 10 advertisements popping up on their line of their social media. So those things need to be, people need to be talked about, told. People need to be trained. Students, teachers, everybody needs to be trained on those things. What we have done at Commonwealth of Learning, and Sironika knows it very well. Sukena also knows to some extent about this course, about Commonwealth Digital Education Leadership Training in Action. The framework for this course was actually developed at University of Cape Town. The curricular material were developed there, and we have now converted that into a platform through which we are reaching out to institutions, ministries, colleges, students, and teachers from secondary education onwards, so that they understand the importance of digital education, education from the beginning. One of the components in that course talks about digital identity and digital footprints and misinformation. I think these are key elements that we are every day facing today on the digital world. There, every day on social media, we are bombarded with misinformation from one source or other. How do we know that which is correct, which one is not correct? That needs training, which was earlier used to be called media information literacy. Now it is about digital literacy or understanding. Some people talk about it's a infodemic. It's a pandemic of misinformation. So digital, understanding your own digital footprint. How do you, when you go online, how do you leave your own footprints on the digital world? When you post something on the things, you are leaving something on something for others to know and track. And also, how do you create your digital identity on understanding of those things, including privacy issues on what to share, what not to share. Those things are important. We have brought some of those elements into a course which is scalable. That's come to my second important part is, okay, universities can do that, but it's the amount of knowledge dissemination required is beyond the capacity of individual institutions. So there is a huge need for creating scalable platforms if you want to train everyone on this planet to understand about the challenges, because now mobile phones are getting into hands of everyone. So the poorest of the poor will have mobile phones, and they will be using digital banking through the mobile phones. They need to understand these critical issues of infodemic. They need to understand about their rights and responsibilities, what they can do, what they should and should not do. So that needs scalable platform that can handle large number of people to be trained. Otherwise, this is going to happen all the time. I'll stop before telling my last point. The graduate attributes of tomorrow, and on particularly if we are looking at graduate attributes from the point of digital world, what is needed today is that in the earlier days, we were talking of reading, writing, and arithmetic as a 3R that we were teaching to school kids. I think today it is needed that we teach people about more important about data literacy, particularly in the universities. When it comes to the university, everyone I think should need read about, understand about data literacy. Now, what is happening on the digital world in terms of data? Whether you are a science student, whether you are a computer science student, you are a humanities student, I think it's important to understand data literacy important. And that also takes me to talk about understanding artificial intelligence and machine learning, and at the basic level, what is happening. Those of the basic skills will allow people or allow our students in the universities to think about in the future new things that are not yet invented. They will prepare themselves to ready for the future. Some of these things will automatically include skills like graduate skills like systems thinking, creativity, ethical dimension, change management, and some of the basics risks are risk mitigation, and so on and so forth. So, but these areas are very important. But as Renata talked about human skills, after all, at the end of the day, we are preparing a whole round human being who leads his or her life well and also supports sustainable development of others. So I think that's a big deal for any university to do, or any individual to have everything at one place. So therefore we all will have our own limitations to some extent, because the things are changing so dramatically that it will be extremely difficult to have all the types of skills required in one individual. So that challenge will continue to haunt universities and teachers all the time. I will stop here, and I would like to jump into other conversation and thoughts.
Okay, thank you very much, Sanjay. I think you also raised a lot of interesting and very important issues there, especially about the technology as an enabler, but not only in a positive way, but as in negative ways also. It's enabling both positive and negative things. That's why we need to prepare our students, because it's like a double-edged sword, if I may say so. And also you talked about these digital natives and digital immigrants. So now, I mean, we are dealing more with the digital natives. The undergraduate students are born with the digital, so they are with all these digital skills. But we have the question about these human skills, or being, how to use the digital skills in such a way that, as you said, technology is moving so fast. We can't keep pace with how fast it develops. It's not just learning all the technical skills, but how to use them in a more effective, as efficient, and as well as in a responsible manner. So I think your whole thing, your thoughts ran about a lot of things. So and also you talked about the C Delta. I think I should say a few words on that, because we have been, let me please say, because we have been implementing C Delta since 2018. And I'm happy to say at the Open Institute of Sri Lanka, we have realized the importance of C Delta for all of our students. So our University Senate and Council has agreed, and we are offering it as a non-credit course, free non-credit course for all our registered students, because we see the importance of that, and through our experience since 2018, we can see that all these concepts of digital identity, digital footprints, those are very novel. Even though they are using the digital technologies quite well, they are not aware of the risks. That you are leaving footprints behind you, that, all those things are novel. So I think this raising awareness, and not only the real technical skills, but all these other related skills when you're using the digital technologies is very important. And about the curriculum, about integrating to the curriculum, you talked about how you all have done. I think Sukaina also has a lot of experience in integrating these digital technologies into the curriculum in your university. So can I invite Sukaina also to share some thoughts about how we can integrate these concepts or digital citizenship in the higher education curriculum based on your experience, maybe, Sukaina?
Thank you. Thanks. Yeah, that was really inspirational, Sanjay. And you said you already mentioned, the importance of the curriculum. Maybe I'll just step back one. Actually, say it also depends how you define curriculum. And for me, curriculum goes beyond the content that is taught to students. It's the whole holistic experience in an institution, the values, the practices, and also we have to remember the hidden curriculum that students experience when they come into university, and depending on their background, it may be more or less accessible to them, and particularly in our university in South Africa, the University of Cape Town, students who come in who are first in their family to access higher education, who come from less privileged socioeconomic backgrounds, have a quite different experience from students who come in from more privileged circumstances. And so their experience of the university and the curriculum is different, and often it's achievement is along racialized lines. So that's not, we cannot ignore the very deep structural issues in a society such as South Africa, because it manifests itself in higher education. And I'm saying that in terms of context because I think it puts a bigger onus on us when we are talking about digital capabilities, digital skills, to not replicate those inequalities, but to pay particular attention to design. I think in terms of curriculum, I mean, I think it's quite contested, or at least a good point of discussion, whether one should teach digital skills, separately. So whether you would have information literacy sessions, digital literacy sessions, and certainly when our first year students come in, we have orientation, we have digital literacy training, and so on, to acculturate them into, the kinds of practices, tools, and technologies that our students will need. Students who are on financial aid get laptops, and so on. So there is a kind of that base level, the attempts to ameliorate inequalities. So, devices, training, and so on. But I think what's more interesting, and I think is something that we need to pay more attention to, is how to embed digital literacies in the core curriculum, in the disciplines. And I think that so that it isn't an add-on, it isn't technical, it's actually philosophical. It's around, what does this mean for my discipline? What does this mean for knowledge production? What does this mean for why I am in higher education for students? I mean, Sanjay, I'm not going to repeat what you said, but I thought maybe one thing that we have been doing at the University of Cape Town is, and it's around graduate attributes and the type of graduate that we want, is how can we empower students to create their own curriculum? And the digital offers an opportunity. So, for example, we have a program called UCT Plus, which allows students who opt in and to capture things beyond the content and their grades onto their transcripts, so that when they leave, they have a transcripts and a portfolio that shows what they have done at university beyond their degree. So it might be participation in leadership in student societies, in sports, in social responsiveness, and so on. And those are all things that universities do. They provide. It's what does it make? What is a particular type of graduate at this university? What are the opportunities provided? And I think the digital is a kind of facilitator, because we can capture some of those either through technology. Students can upload their achievements, and it goes onto their transcripts. So it allows students themselves to choose, say, this is the kind of student that I am, or that I have achieved beyond what other people say about them. So I think what I'm interested in, and it would be a nice conversation, is how we can foster students' agency in responding to graduate attributes. And I think I'll stop there, because I think Renata also wanted to come in. But I think digital badges and e-portfolios are tools, but they're also different ways of communicating success and achievements. Thanks, Sharonika.
Yeah, thanks, Sukaina. I think that's a very interesting idea to get the involvement of students as co-creators of the curriculum, to get their inputs in different creative ways. So that requires creative thinking among the instructors as well, I believe, because you have to move away from this traditional, as you mentioned, moving away from this traditional content-driven sort of curriculum, but to think about more innovative and creative ways of making students responsible and to contribute the students as contributors in developing this novel curriculum, so that both, together we can achieve these targets. Okay, so I think that we talked a lot about this. What is digital citizenship? What are graduate attributes, and what's the relationship between those two, and different aspects of all these things. So can I ask you, okay, now you have vast experience in working with a lot of institutions globally, including us as well, but all over the globe, you are a global practitioner of enabling such initiatives. So what is, can I ask you, what is the role of higher education institutions and practitioners, especially in the development of digital citizenship in terms of, what we have discussed so far? So,
thanks, Shiro. I've been kicked out a couple of times and I've tried to log back in, so I hope you can hear me. Just give me a thumbs up, Very, very quick response. Thanks. I think you've got to design it, and I'm a great proponent of it. If you don't design it in the learning experience, it will not happen. We can talk about this, and somebody asked a question on the chat, about resilience and respect and these kinds of things. We're talking about it. We know that these things are there, but how do you ensure that they get into the programs, the programs that universities or organizations develop? And the simplest answer is you've got to proactively design it. So this is why you and I talked about this before. It is important to get digital citizenship as part of the graduate attributes. So it becomes one of those things that organizations aspire to, and then you can hold people responsible. So cascading from there, the deans and the heads of departments and the course coordinators and program coordinators, they will take the cues, and they're expected to take the cues from the graduate attributes. That's how programs are developed in organizations, in any organization, in the commercial sector or in the public education sector. So look, we are waking up, and I'm again, just for your information, I don't know, Ren, I just saw a piece of information today saying that the federal government of Australia is committing about $18 billion towards funding the development of micro-credentials, and they've actually opened
upskilling, yep,
applications for institutions looking for so everybody is recognizing this now. So it is not, we are not the first ones and the only ones talking about this. It's already happening. So as an educator, a simple answer to your question, Sharonika, and my answer would be, you have to proactively design it. So any program, take a BSc program, take a certificate program, a diploma program, if digital competency is not injected in the learning activities of the subjects and of the curriculum, like Sukaina was talking about, well, it's not going to happen, is it? You can't leave this to chance.
Yeah, I just, there's a couple of things, if you don't mind, some I might pipe in here and just continue the conversation that Sukaina's started so well. First of all, I think there's a missing piece here, and this is where the Australian government is really driving at the moment, is getting employers involved as well. So again, if we extend the notion that further education is a step towards employability and towards having a job and a career and getting the skills that you can start working, where does the employer factor in? And one of the things that I've been deeply involved at federal level in Australia is the rewriting of skills standards. Because at the moment, employers complain, oh, I'm getting graduates and they're not job ready and they don't know how to do the job, and etc. Like there's just, the system is, I guess, what you would call somewhat broken. And what they're trying to do is to now have an employer-led approach to what are the skills that the employers need. And again, it's difficult. We've all talked about the fact that the jobs are changing so rapidly. So the minute you start to peg skills, they change and then they change and then they change. So let's kind of cast forward as much as we know. What are the skills that citizens are going to need, let's say, in the next decade? And how do we reform our thinking around skills standards so that educators don't have to guess anymore? Because at the end of the day, you guys are playing guesswork to some extent to say, well, what courses do we need to run? Because what are the employability skills that are needed? Yes. And how do we start to mold training and education to those skill standards? And to your point, so well made, long degrees, a lot of students get to work and some of the things that they've learned are no longer valid in terms of some of those technical skills. So how do we scaffold, I guess, more generalized learning with micro-credentials and also work integrated learning? The other thinking that's coming out of Australian think tanks is this going back to apprenticeships and traineeships. So if you think about trade-based industries, certainly in Australia, you go through TAFE, and what TAFE does is you actually go and work somewhere and then you do learning alongside your working, and it's work integrated learning. So now the thinking is moving to, well, do we want to get students to work faster, and then while they're working, scaffold them with micro credentials and learning, again based by universities, by TAFE institutions, still the further education institutions, but in a different way? Can the degree be delivered differently and more within the context and fabric of work? So that is definitely emerging thinking in Australia, and there's a lot of money being thrown at upskilling and reskilling. One of the things I also just wanted to deepen, and again, a point beautifully made by Shikana, is this concept of deep work. And you made it so beautifully. I think you referred to TikTok and social media. Unfortunately, what that's doing is it's actually causing our students and young people to be their attention span is shortening, not lengthening. But when we think about complex work and we think about needing to do that complex work together as in teams and collaboratively, it actually requires people to do deep work and stay with a longer attention span. And this concept that was introduced, and I think Sanjay as well introduced it, is this unlearning and then relearning. There's a whole lot of that mental gymnastics going on, and I imagine educators and employers are facing into this at the moment, is how do we expand focus and attention span, not contract it? What are the pathways to help people to do that? Because that is truly going to be a big differentiator in this complex work that has to be done within the workplace and this challenge around shortening attention spans.
Yeah, thanks, Renata. I was actually going to ask you for some examples, and you very nicely give us some examples of how to address these issues, which is, I think common issues. It's what you said. I mean, those issues are common everywhere. I mean, here also we have, and I think it needs a change in the mindsets of people to change from this traditional mindset is also a little bit slowly happening. But I think we all understand the significance of it. And you were talking about micro-credentials, and I think it's an important thing here to go into that sort of novel things. I think maybe Sanjay might like to add, or Sukaina. I think now it's open for all four of you to add anything. And I think there are some other questions in the chat box as well. So I'll keep it open for all. You maybe Sanjay might like to say.
Yes, Shironika, thank you. I think it's lots of important points, and I'll again draw from what has just been told. I think there is, in the context of graduate attributes and the university's context, we look at graduate attributes, universities, what the university do, what are the role of the universities, okay? And within that context, I think Som made an important point about if you don't design, it doesn't happen, because who takes the role and what is done. And in that context, even what the student agency that Sukena talks about is also a design in itself. Because if we are not putting student agency into the design, it is left to everyone. So the student agency and giving choice to the students to design his or her own curriculum and study what he or she wants to study and develop the graduate attributes that he or she wants to do is also a design aspect. So that's important. Having said that, I think it's an inclusive way we are talking about. It's not talking either or kind of things and things. But I'll tell you what is important. I was talking to a vice chancellor in a university in one of the country in Africa. In the context of industry relationship and to develop curricula based on the industry requirements, they did a study and went to the companies in their country and asked, what do you want the skills of people in the next 5 years? The majority of the answer is, we don't know. So in such a situation, the role of the universities becomes very important. What is that? And in that situation, graduate attributes becomes very important. It is not, graduate attributes are not content-centered attributes. And therefore the graduate attributes need to be developed and fostered in such a way that these are transacted in the curriculum transaction process in the curricular content subjects that goes in. So how that happens also brings more challenges for the teachers in the digital world themselves. But are the teachers equipped themselves to do it? And as I said before, we most of the teachers are digital immigrants, and they themselves are trying to learn and having those challenges. So that brings us to, huge opportunities like micro credentials. Okay, not just to put the blame on the universities that they are not producing graduates for employability. No, higher education is not responsible for everything that happens in the world. When I was studying in the university, the objective was universities are providing general skills. When I go to the job market, I'll get inducted. The industry today doesn't want to take that responsibility and wants to put that responsibility into the university. And that's should not be acceptable. The industry business has a role to induct people to their own processes and take their share of responsibility. And that's what the governments are asking. Now you design the courses, micro credentials, based along with other university providers or along with polytechnic providers. For example, in New Zealand, what is happening? So it's no one either or responsibility. It is the two-way responsibility of graduate attributes now. When it comes to the phenomenon like micro-credential getting popularity, whether in New Zealand, Australia, or in Canada, or in Ireland, or any other places. So this is the new trend. So it is a combined efforts that happens. But that doesn't mean that universities will now wait for private providers or industry to jump into for their own graduate attributes. Universities have a higher role. Universities are higher education institutions. What is higher about higher education is important for us to look at. And within that context of what is higher about higher education, the universities need to design their graduate attributes in a way that is futuristic, in a way that includes the digital inevitable that is happening today and will happen in future. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Sanjay. I think both you and Som highlighted what we have been doing, is designing learning experiences for since 2003. We have been attempting to do this with our programs in various ways, and we have progressed so far. Som, would you like to add any more ideas on this designing learning experiences, focusing on this digital citizenship, any ideas, or I mean, or anybody else?
Yeah, I'm just, thanks, Shiro. I mean, I was just, Sanjay has nailed it. I mean, he said it so beautifully that I don't need to repeat that. But a lot of this is going, you know, it's not confidential if I tell you that I've been part of a panel auditing one of the universities on the African continent. And it was very noteworthy to find that when we were looking at the teaching and learning policies and plans of that university, a very clear emphasis on a learning-centered approach to the design of learning experiences. So universities are already becoming aware of the fact that it is no longer a question of being learner-centered or student-centered or content-centered or not, that the end game of any educational experience is the experience itself. And the experience is, as Renata was pointing out, and many of us have said the same thing, developed in consultation with employers to enhance employability. So universities cannot function in isolation anymore. Well, for a long time, that's been very clear. So if I were a senior administrator in a university, I will have to be very vigilant about what's happening into the workplace, because at the end of the day, I want my or our graduates to be employable. So in order to develop those kinds of productive learning experiences, you've got to get into this mindset of your faculty members that we're in the business of designing productive learning experiences which are authentic, which are meaningful, which are going to enhance employability, as Renata was saying. You come out of the university, you should, I mean, I take the point that Sanjay was making that there will be some induction required, but those kinds of inductions will be about local processes, about niche regulations and requirements of their working environment. But you shouldn't be in a situation where universities are in the business of pushing out content, and then when you get out of the university, you can't function in the workplace. Then if that is the case, then there's a problem. People coming out of universities or tertiary education institution should be able to swim right away, because that was the goal of you getting into formal education, to be able to learn how to swim, right? So it's very complex. Of course, it is complex, and there's nothing new about it. But if you go back to the starting blocks, and that's what we are saying, the whole point about this panel discussion is the importance of graduate attributes, starting off with graduate attributes, because that's how we function in a higher education setting. So once you've got your graduate attributes, carefully orchestrated, then they cascade into program attributes, and then program attributes, are articulated into subject, learning outcomes and competencies, and so on and so on. So it's a top-down approach, but also it can be bottom-up in terms of into the sorts of things that we've been talking about the agencies of learners and the learners that they take. But somebody needs to describe this, somebody needs to orchestrate this. It is not good enough to say, we don't know. We have to figure it out. How do you figure it out? You talk to people, you talk to partners, you talk to employees, you go and find out what people need. And you can predict, at least in the forthcoming years, up to 5 years, or up to 10 years, what the skills might be, and not cast in stone, that they are changeable, that they can be adjusted. But the point that you're raising is the importance of focusing on the design of learning experience, because when that is productive, when that is meaningful, when that is motivating, then learning is motivating. Then people would want to go to school. There will be less dropout. There will be less attrition and less failure, and then that's really the only way. I mean, there is no other way. I don't think there's need to be much argument about that. I'm very clear about this, and that's the message that I've been pushing around wherever I go.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Yes, you've been pushing us as well to move towards this learning-centered learning experience design. So we have been trying our best to do that, but I think we still have to move forward, integrating these digital competencies into the graduate attributes as well. I think now we can take, now we have half an hour, like almost 30 minutes. We can take some questions now. So any of you, our four panelists have I think they have very well explained, and we talked about a lot of interesting and informative ideas. So there are a few questions in the chat box as well. If I may take one by one, any of you can address them. One question is, please elaborate a bit on the 4 R's of digital citizenship: respect, resilience, responsibility, and reasoning. That's one question. Would anybody like to address that? Maybe Sukaina or Sanjay?
Sure, I'll have a go. I'm not sure exactly where they came from, but I think everybody has alluded to them, and I think there's 4 R's there: respect, resilience, responsibility, reason, and I think it's actually underlying that is both the rights that you have as a digital citizenship and the responsibilities. So, and I think that those underpin. So in terms of, I would say in terms of respect, it's around respecting the rights of others in digital citizenship, because it's not only the rights that you have, it's actually your responsibility towards the community that you are part of. Resilience is, resilience is a really interesting one, I think, because for me, it's about, we talk about our students needing to be resilient, to be able to come back from setbacks, to be able to, pursue the course actually in the higher education sector. So I suppose the resilience is the ability to keep going, to have a kind of long-term view. Responsibility, I've already mentioned, it's what are you responsible for? And reasoning, I think, comes to what we've talked about, which is about the thinking, critical skills, arguments. And in fact, one of the things I think it's a really nice question, because I think what's been happening with the purchase of Twitter at the moment is really showing up the lack of digital reasoning of, we really need responsible digital citizens in charge of our digital platforms. And we are a long way away from that, if the experience of what is happening to Twitter is anything to go by. And I think it's going to be an amazing teaching case for digital capabilities in the future, if the platform is still around sometime soon. I'll stop there. Maybe someone else wants to come in on that.
Yeah, thanks, Kaina. Yeah, I'm just looking at the chat box. Rather than questions, there are a few comments. I think I will just mention a few comments. Samanthi has mentioned about our MADE program, which we developed with the support from the Commonwealth of Learning, and SOM was the key facilitator. Way back, like in 2003, we started developing this in a novel way. We were focusing on these developing attributes which are needed for their context, right? So we started doing this learning-centered learning design even at that time. So I think that's a very good example. And there's another comments about the, we learn about using new technology, but there's a huge knowledge gap between technology and us. Learning new technology, with the COVID, it came as an opportunity, but still still there's a huge knowledge gap. Is there, would one of you like to address that or say anything on that? That's not a question, that's just a comment. How to address this knowledge gap? Sanjay?
No, not at this stage for me.
Okay.
I think, for me, the micro-credentials pathway is such a great pathway for that. Because as I said to you, the minute you sort of get in into something, it can change quite rapidly. You know, I'm a good example. I studied computer science. I studied Pascal. I've never coded a single line of Pascal in my career, but it also helped me to understand coding and coding languages and how to structure code, etc. And so I had the base learning, but I then had to learn COBOL because that's what the client that I was working on needed. And so I had to do learning, and look, I was at Accenture at the time and they did internal learning, but maybe I would have had to have done a micro-credential and gone and learned about COBOL. This concept of lifelong learning, of constant upskilling, it is absolutely what it's going to be all about. And if we sort of sit on our hands and go, well, I've just paid all this money for a degree and that's all I'm ever going to need, that's going to be impossible. So if we want to stay ahead of the game, if we want to stay employable and enjoying all of the spoils of a great career, we're going to have to get in the habit of continuing and upskilling ourselves and relearning, unlearning, relearning. It sounds exhausting,
Yeah.
but actually those that can embrace it are going to really be a step ahead.
Yes,
Yeah.
I think that's that idea came into my mind also. This really unlearning and relearning is really important, especially at this time. How fast things are developing. Now, when you were telling, I remembered I also learned Pascal a long time ago. But I mean, but that base, that foundation, that I think that's a good foundation, so that you can build up on that. You know, I think that's what you were trying to say. So I think that's good example. Okay, so there are a few more comments. Could you? Okay, I think that question is for Sanjay. Elaborate on the digital natives and digital immigrant. You have already given the answer, but maybe you can say a few things about this digital.
Yeah. I think that the Pascal was a good example, and
Yes.
anybody those who does Pascal, I want to also add my name to that, but that also tells that how old we are. And you know, I did some of those things, like including PL1 and Fortran and all those things. But I think what was important, and Aranta, you highlighted those things, is that any education, you know, if it takes into some of the basic graduate attributes, the learner is going to take it forward and apply it in a particular context. So the content might change, the demands might change, but the learner is able to adapt to the situation because of that resilience. Those 4 are nicely put by Pereira, drawing from what we were talking out. I know there that resilience is the key word here. If you are not taught something, but you have taught resilience in a way that you are able to learn something quickly in an efficient way from another source and apply that thing for the demand of the industry or demand of a clientele. Now, having said that, the reference that I made it to digital immigrant and digital native, it's not a pure science, okay? And there are a lot of criticisms people don't like about those things. There is now no demarcation of those things. I use that as an expression to differentiate between what the young kids do with a smartphone today and how quickly they use, and how quickly I use a smartphone or my parent use a smartphone. When I gave them a smartphone to use that, how do they use it? So those are the kind of differences you need to look at. And the skills, and particularly Sukena was talking about the students who are coming to universities today, they are already digital literate, okay? But does that digital literacy include, and there are basic training things happen, but are they being taught in a holistic manner some of the issues that we alluded to today? Probably not. So there is a need for graduate attributes to evolve, adapting to the new scenarios, and those needs to be articulated. So one of the things that I would suggest is that we should not go always with the expressions sometimes that are used as such in the presentations. So that's the explanation. I definitely wanted to make it on the chat box, and I made it.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Sanjay. I think there's another question. I mean, any of you would try to attempt how to apply these digital literacy skills for students with different learning needs. Would anybody like to respond to
Yeah, look, I'll grab this one just quickly, only because I happened to be at a workshop earlier today where I was talking about, and I'm not sure if this is where you're going with this, Sharonika, but perhaps neurodiverse people. Let's start with there. There's a lot more knowledge. People are getting the right kind of diagnosis. So neurodiversity is very much a norm in society now. And we were talking about employability skills. So interestingly, and I don't want to generalize, but quite a few neurodiverse young people and older people have great technology skills, actually. Some great coding, digital skills, that they're actually, able to navigate robotics and mechatronics and all sorts of kind of really out there and complex digital technical skills and capabilities, but where they sometimes struggle and where they sometimes need something which is a bit different is in these employability skills, is how to actually work in the current workplaces. How do people that work with them understand them and have the kind of human skills, again, if I want to refer to those, to be able to work cohesively and collaboratively and then get those great outcomes for the business. So for me, I think when I think about different accessibility and different learning styles and different needs, I start to think about the digital world is starting to challenge us, particularly around these diverse workplaces and different humans that think and learn different ways. They need to work together and still drive for great outcomes for the businesses that they work for.
Thanks, Renata. I think that's a good answer for that question. I think we can open the floor to any other questions from the audience, because we still have some more time. Anybody in the audience, would you like to ask any questions? Or there are a lot of comments about that they are finding this very useful, which is wonderful. Okay, so most of these are comments that, but are there any specific questions any of you would like to either put in the chat box, or maybe you can unmute and ask as well?
Even a camera on would be amazing, Sharonika.
Yeah.
I always, challenge the people that are on calls to put their camera on. But anyway.
Yeah, because we have a problem with the connectivity. That's why we had the. But at the end of the day, we are going to ask everybody to switch their videos and get a group photo.
Make a group photo.
Then, yeah.
So
we'll do that. Okay, so if any of you would like to ask any questions, you can switch on the camera and ask unmute yourself and ask the question. I think Chamira can allow that now for the audience.
Yeah, madam, I already did that.
Enabled.
They
Thank
can
you.
ask question.
Okay, so okay, from the audience, I think we have a good audience here.
Mm.
Yes, Dr. Shanta. Please unmute. You're muted, Shanta. Okay, right. Still, okay.
Yeah, thank you very much, Professor Shironika. Actually, the one particular undergraduate program, we have a youth kind of youth participation and the governance. That module we talk much about citizenship in the all face-to-face scenario, but now bringing the new kind of a concept of digital citizenship. Now we recently experienced how the young people, together with their senior members, how they struggle against the existing government, and they were able to make use of their rights using digital platform heavily. So that is a very wonderful example which we can actually highlight at this moment. So, but now the after the struggle now, once we establish new government, the young citizens, but how they enjoy their rights, they enjoy their citizenship rights. Now how that we are actually a little concerned about the aftermath of that struggle. The young people, some are in prison. You see, the responsiveness of these digitalized activism, because activism also part and parcel of this the citizenship rights. Now this we are in a little juncture to understand the upwards and downwards trends in this the digital activism and the how societies are moving with these struggles using the digital the citizenship kind of engagement. So I would like to see some examples or experiences around the world about these repercussions of the citizenship activism, and you see something like that.
Okay, Shanta, thank you for your question. So anybody would like to respond to that?
Can I just make a quick comment, Sanjay, then I'll let you go, because I'm sure you have a better response than what I'm just about to say. I think we've got to look at this in balance, in perspective. That sure, social media and digital technologies have been used in a variety of situations, not just those in Sri Lanka, for example. I mean, look at what's happening in Ukraine. Even how people are using social media, and look what's happening in China. So we are very aware, in Russia. So it's not just a recent development, number one. It's not just in the hands of some people and not the others. I mean, a lot of people are using it. And we also know how governments are controlling these sorts of things. But if you just put that in balance and look at it in perspective and take the technology equation out, there is really no difference. At the end of the day, humans are making those decisions, whether we are making those decisions in relation to technology or we are making those decisions in relation to without technology. I mean, we have governments have controlled how people gather in places in physical forms before technology came around, and that too was controlled by people. I mean, I don't need to mention societies where more than 3 or 4 people couldn't get together in person to protest about something. So control and those sorts of generic things, they've been around in society all the time. This is how we moderate ourselves, and that's why some of the people might argue that we prefer to live in democratic societies where at least we have access to those kinds of tools and technologies and opportunities, to go on and complain and argue about things and discuss things and put forth our ideas. But that comes with responsibility. And that was where I started, earlier on when we began this session, that it comes with responsibility. And other people have mentioned that, as well. And so the point that I just want to leave you with is this is nothing new about it. These sorts of things we are familiar with. It's just that we have the technology in the equation, but the principles are the same. The
only thing I want to add to that, if I could, Som, just very quickly, is 2 things very quickly. I think people forget their manners on social media. One of the things that you can do a bit more in the virtual space than in the physical space is you can hide behind a tag and no one knows who you are. That's the one thing I think, and therefore people are more likely to be ruder than if they were face to face. And I
Okay.
always say to people, if you're not going to be able to say what you say on social media to someone's face, then don't say it. The second thing is, and this came up, and again, I think that Sukana, I'm so sorry. I know I'm mispronouncing your name, so I do apologize about that, is the digital footprint. And really importantly, 71% of recruiters were asked, do you check somebody's digital footprint before you offer an interview? Sorry, recruiters were asked, I think 3,000 or 4,000 recruiters were asked, would you check somebody's digital footprint before you decided to give them an interview or not? And 71% said yes.
Yes.
And that was in 2017. Now you can imagine they'd be up at 100% probably.
Okay.
So we need to remember that the footprint that we leave that is impossible to erase is going to be there forever and a day, to be discoverable by people that are then going to make decisions on whether they're going to employ us or not. And that's a really important thing to remember as we navigate the world of digital.
Yeah, I want to jump in and to this important point to extend what Som did talk about is, the challenges in the digital world is that it can be controlled, not just by the governments, but also by the owner or the perpetuator of that technology.
Mhm.
So what you are actually getting, is not what you should get today. Even, for example, you go to Google to search. The search results that you are getting in the Google, you might be thinking that, oh, I am getting this. Ask somebody else to do that same search through another mobile phone or from another device. The results could be different.
Very different.
So what you get is already moderated or already coming through a different algorithm based on what you have been looking at, what you are searching and all those things. So what is important in the digital world is to understand those things and how do we manage things ourselves. We have seen what things digital technologies can do on Arab Spring, for example, was an example. Okay, so we can see that it is positive. Some people will say, no, that's negative. So all those things are there. What is there for us in the education sector? Can we avoid the digital inevitability? If digital world is there and our students are going to work in a digital world, how can we prepare our students to be better absorbed, better prepared, and do well in that digital world? Despite the challenges of the digital technologies that we have, starting from lack of access to students, to the problems of controls, the problems of skills and everything. As an institution, as educational providers, what is our responsibility in this field? And those things there are critical elements to those things. Those need to be, and the most important thing is equity, and then ethics. If you are doing things in an equitable manner and ethical manner, then you are using technologies appropriately.
Thank you for those responses. I think I think it focused on your digital identity. Ultimately, what sort of a digital identity you are creating for yourself? Whether it's a negative digital identity or a positive, we don't know. We really don't know. We only see what we see or what we want to see. Maybe I think that's a very good point, Sanjay. So I think we have to raise awareness of our students about this thing as well. Okay, so yes, the ethics, equity and ethics are very important. Yes. Okay, so we can take one more question if anybody would like to have another question. And thank you, Shanta, for your question as well. Yeah. Okay, from the audience, are there any other questions or comments? Anybody would like to switch on your video? And microphone.
Yes, this is not a question. Actually, on behalf of the Faculty of Education, I want to wish and I want to acknowledge that we receive a lot of valuable information and a very good discussion. Actually, I want to ensure that we will incorporate all the valuable information and all the strategies what you mentioned here. Now we are developing 2 programs that you already know that Professor under the leadership of Professor Zironica. Therefore, we will use all the information and all the valuable idea in our program. Thank you very much, all the panelists. Thank you.
Sashikala, that's our current Dean of the Faculty, Professor Sashikala Kugamurthy. Because I think Som already knows, but I'm introducing her to you. Thank you, Sashikala, for that response. And if there aren't any other questions, maybe any of your panelists would like to say any concluding words before we end the session. We have like 10 minutes more.
I think one of the important things is to just remind ourselves what we're really talking about, to bring everything together and say what's the takeaway messages here. That it's important for organizations to think about their attributes, graduate attributes. This is how we conceptualize the whole session. Remember, Shironika, when we started talking about it in the first place, that there is so much talk about digital literacy. And obviously, we have spent a lot of time talking about it. But then so what? How do you make it happen? How do you realize it? And one very sure and sensible way of making sure that digital literacy is accounted for and is handled in a meaningful way is to integrate that in graduate attributes and program outcomes and program competencies, because that's how any program would get developed. And if it is not there, then it'll be missed, like Sanjay was saying. So that's the whole point of this conversation, and that's the message that we want.
Okay, thank you, Som. I think there's a connectivity problem with you. Your connectivity, we can't hear you now.
Participants with that in whatever way, wherever you are, the is integrated into the core business and the core function.
Thank you, Som. Yes, any others who would like to say any final few words before we wind up?
Yeah, maybe just building on what Som and others have said, what we haven't really discussed explicitly is the role of assessment in our designs. And because, if we think about what really drives student learning, it's the assessment. And I think that part of linking the assessment, the learning outcomes and the graduate attributes, but also to perhaps challenge some of the more traditional forms of assessment that we have in our institutions in favor of more innovative, creative ways that can actually create perhaps those linkages between employability, industry, the soft skills. And that's a real challenge. I'm just talking from my context in a kind of more traditional residential-based, research-based universities such as University of Cape Town. We have very entrenched, practices that have served us well in many ways. But I think with the digital turn and the opportunities for more innovative, experiential kind of authentic assessment, I think that if that is what drives student learning, if that is what motivates students, then I think a more, you can look at the learning experience and the content, but I think that if the assessment practices don't change, then you kind of lose the opportunity. So I would just also challenge us to think around assessment design. Thanks.
Exactly. I think that's a very valid point, Sukaina. Whatever we do, finally the assessment, because if it's totally exam, I think that's a common issue we are facing. We are trying to do so many normal things, but finally it's the block. If you have the traditional assessments, then everything's becomes useless. So authentic teaching, learning, as well as authentic assessment is quite important. Very good point. Thank you, Sukaina. Any other things, Sanjay or Renata?
Yeah. Thank you, Sironika. I think this has been a great discussion with I know different kinds of idea, all putting together, taking the whole, and Open University of Sri Lanka doing this thing. I saw that there are over nearly about 50 people attending the whole session. So we have spent 2 hours each. So it's 100 hours spending on such an important topic. And I think we should look at that. But the whole learning in that context, and we have spent that kind of time. But I would stop with 3 keywords for that. I think my key message for today is that universities, and particularly this is a forum for Open University of Sri Lanka, and I think it's important to rethink, revisit, and refresh. Now, digital citizenship and graduate attributes, and that's what is the message for today. Probably the way we spoke, all 4 of us, and with your moderation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sanjay. So you mentioned 3 R's there, right? Rethink, revisit, and refresh yourselves. That's a good message. Thank you very much. Renata, anything?
No, just look, thank you so much for having me on the panel. As I said, I'm humbled by the people that I'm on this panel with, and just the opportunity to be able to reach, as you know, as Sanjay rightly points out, a large group of people, and for us to have a really robust dialogue around something that, you know, it's actually not the future world of work. We're already in it. And so for us, it's about, you know, how do we continue to sort of have these conversations so that we can get the most out of this amazing world that we are in and going to continue to be in. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I think we have to thank you all for joining with us today, despite your very busy. I know all of you are very busy experts in your own areas, and you have shared with us a lot of insights. A lot of food for thought is there. From the comments, we can see that the audience has also realized the value of this discussion, and we have recorded this. And I hope we can. I hope you won't mind that we make this discussion part as a video available for anybody who couldn't join in. Okay, thank you. So personally, I would like to thank each and every one of you for agreeing to come into this panel discussion on my invitation. And on behalf of the Faculty of Education of the Open University of Sri Lanka, I really, really appreciate your time and effort put on this, this valuable discussion. I think it was a very productive and very valuable discussion for all of us. Okay, Vajra, would you like to say the last words, and we can have the group photo? Please don't go away. We have to get a group photo. So please keep on your videos on, and I think Vajra will ask everybody to switch on their videos as well. Thank you very much. Okay, Vajra, over to you.
Yes, madam. I also want to give us few words on behalf of the organizing committee of the International Open University Research Session 2022. Thank you, all of you, especially for our panelists, Professor Somnaidu, Ms. Sukaina Virji, Dr. Sanjay Mishra, and Ms. Renata Sugairo for accepting our invitation. Actually, we highly appreciated your valuable contribution. And thank you very much, madam, for all your contributions, because those things are very helpful for us to succeed this event. And finally, thank you all the participants in the audience for being with us and for your active participation. Thank you, all of you. And please switch on the videos to take the group photo.
Look at those beautiful faces.
Okay, so now you can see all the beautiful faces. Okay, please switch on everybody's cameras so that we can get a good group photo. Chamira, can you do that?
Good to see you. Good to see some familiar faces, huh? How are you, guys? Sashikala?
Okay, let us know when it's done, please.
Yes, madam, I am done.
Done? That's okay.
Yes,
So got a group photo. Okay, then thank you very much. I think we had a very fruitful 2 hours. We didn't feel the time go as well. So I can't imagine that 2 hours as we have spent 2 hours. So we started on time and we are ending on time. Thank you so much, everybody, and all the participants as well, all the audience, and for all your lovely comments.
Yes.
And finally, all the finalists, once again, thank you so much. Okay,
Thank
so we
you.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye. Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.